Welcome to The Joy Hour Show, where real life meets real talk. I'm your host, Tom Lyman. Today's episode is incredibly personal. We're joined by someone who has walked with us through every valley, every lie, every relapse, and every breakthrough. Dr. Daniel Surstad has been our counselor for over 10 years and has definitely seen me at my worst. But he did not give up. I'm so thankful for all of his help. He's a man of wisdom, truth, grace, and he continues to speak into my life today. So whether your marriage is hanging by a thread or you're fighting your way out of addiction, this conversation will meet you where you are. So let's dive in. Dr. Surstad, welcome to the Joy Hour Show.
Thank you, Tom, Lana. Great to be here. Great to be with all of you. It's an honor. Excited to be a part of this and what's fixing to happen.
And Lana, it's good to have you in the studio today.
Good to be back.
It's good to be married.
It is good to be married.
Yes.
In a large part, thanks to Dr. Surstad.
Amen. On previous episodes, my wife and I have discussed openly things that we've been through, and we do that all for a purpose, is to share hope and know that there is healing, and also express how important it is to put in the work. And so sometimes when people hear the word counselor or counseling or change or coaching, they can have a mindset of, I don't need that, I'm fine. But a lot of times in life, I've found that we're actually not fine a lot of the times. And so I'm thankful for counseling that's been such a big part of the healing in my personal life and then together in our marriage. And just, again, so thankful that there are men and women that are counselors and are patient. That's a thing that I'm personally working on, but I'm in the room here today with somebody that was very patient with me. And the first question for you, like, why and how and what made you stick with us through all of that? What was the main reason that you kept showing up for us?
Well, great question, I suppose. I would take it back, maybe even beyond that. I went through some personal things myself years ago, more than one occasion. And it was really hard to find. In fact, I never did find somebody that was able to stick it out, or somebody that was able to speak, that I was willing to listen to or able to listen to or trusted. And so what got me on the track that I've been on is that there was nobody that I could find. So I determined to become that person that I could find. So a lot of time when I'm involved in situations, and one of them was with you folks, that's a thought that goes in my mind that's in the back there, is that I want to be the person that I needed that wasn't there. And so I've experienced a little bit of my own pain. So watching that in others, and then the excitement and patience is there's a verse in the Bible that talks about, says something like patience. Well, we know patience is a virtue, but there's I'm drawing a blank right now. And your patience possesses your soul is what I'm thinking of there. So there's not a lot of people that are patient, and they want things done right now, or even this month, and God forbid that it would take 6 months or a year or 2 years or sometimes 3 years to get to where I want to get. So I just am willing to wait for the payoff, which is huge, just to be able to watch the growth. And for me, for me, it's kind of like in the involvement I remember with you folks, other folks, but you primarily today. It was almost like hiccups, hiccuping. And so you said earlier that I knew every part and I was part of all, and I doubt that I was.
Yeah.
I know I was a part of it, but I got, it's like with a baby, somebody that is with the parents of that baby. They don't see the growth on a daily basis. Every time they see the baby, they don't see the growth. But when you only see somebody in person or see the baby or whatever, like once a week or once a month or a couple times a month, it's kind of easier from a distance to see the growth. And so, yeah.
I have to ask you a question. I'm going off script now. That's
Cool.
where it gets fun. You did see, though, more than anybody. And counselors do. There's a lot of personal information shared. You were with us the longest and through the darkest. A lot of walkout moments and sessions. You could share some things right now that the audience would probably love to hear, and that you're more than welcome to or not. But were there moments where you had your doubts? We can sit here and talk about how all the potential you saw in Tom and in us, but come on, be honest. Did you have moments where you just weren't really sure if this thing was going to turn around and make it?
Well, yeah.
And there it is, folks.
Yeah. Probably, maybe a few times. I don't, I think one time kind of comes to my mind.
Please share.
I don't have an office where people come.
Right.
I do most of my work virtually, but with you folks, I was able. I think we saw each other. I traveled to where you were for various reasons, and while there we would meet, and I think that was like it was once a month, sometimes every other month. But I remember one case in particular. I was staying at, I won't give the name of the hotel, but it's a suite, kind of a 2-bedroom suite. And we were on the first floor. And so it's kind of a personal, it's different than an office. It's like personal space, right? There's the bedroom, and then there's the kind of a living room. So it's a little separate, but it's like, that's where I lived while I was there, and that's where I would meet folks. There's some chairs and couches and comfortable setting, right? And so I remember one time I would really never know exactly what was going to happen. Right? But this particular time, we were there. The two of you were on the couch that sits at least 3 people. And I think, if I remember right, that particular time you were both using the edges. So there was this big space in between, and that sent a lot of messages there on that particular time, and other times as well, if I remember correctly. But on that time, I don't remember specifically how the whole thing, what all the verbiage that was going on, the conversation. But at one point, here I am. I'm just facing the two of you, and it's like boom, and Tom gets up and stalks out of the room and closes the door. Well, I try to be very careful, and for me, I don't on a professional basis. I don't. I'm not in a room together with just one person.
Right.
And especially another man's wife. And all of a sudden, that's the way it is. And so I didn't know what to do exactly. I stood up, and I calmly walked. I think I was calmly walked over to the door and opened it a little, propped it open so that there was a little bit, at least a little bit of space, and walked back. And I'm thinking to myself something totally different than what I'm saying. I'm thinking, what in the world? Where do we go from here? What's going to happen? But, you know, I didn't close the door, and you came back. Not that day.
No, because that day I'm pretty sure he left, and I can't remember how I got home, but he left the hotel.
It wasn't that day, but we reconvened and kept at it. And I think that's a key.
But maybe that was a day you had doubts. That
Oh,
was
yeah.
one of the few times.
Yeah, I didn't know. Am I going to see? You know, is this over? Is this done?
Yeah.
How's this going to happen? There were a couple moments.
I think for all the times that maybe I doubted, though, those were the times that you encouraged me. Because I do remember a specific time, and I mentioned this in my book that's almost finished because it was in my journal entry I just came across recently. But it was in the summer of 2021, so this was probably about 6 months before he went into rehab, finally got his act together. I was definitely at a breaking point. Things were getting really bad with him. And I remember I was still coming to counseling. He was not. And I had a session with you. We were going through the Running Scared book. If you remember, you had recommended that book. And I was like, I don't have an issue with fear. That's not what I'm dealing with. You're like, let's just go through the book and just see what you think about it. I quickly changed my mind, realized fear was a huge issue that I was struggling with. But I remember you made the statement to me that you said, I still see a potential future for Tom, like a future ministry for him. If you can just be patient a little bit longer, I see something there. I know it's hard to see right now, but I see something there. And it was just like little bits of encouragement, you know, because you were saying that at one end. I had other people on the other side saying, why are you still there? Why haven't you left yet? Why, you know, but then.
And some of those were saying the same thing to me.
Yeah.
At the same time, they were saying it to you.
And people that I respected.
Yeah,
you know,
for sure.
And I get it coming from a place of concern, but that wise counsel that I was receiving, though, and something in my own spirit too, you know, in prayer was also saying the same thing. Just be patient a little bit longer. Be patient a little bit longer. But then getting that confirmation from you as my counselor was so huge. Yeah.
Well, keep in mind, if you haven't listened to the other episodes, diving deep into my story, my wife and I, this was a 12-year full-blown addiction: alcohol, steroids, cocaine, adultery. I was a mess. And so many of these counseling sessions, I was in the room high and drunk, or at least, pretty wasted. And I remember that time stomping out of the hotel, and I was under the influence of both, and I was anxious to get more of it. I think I was running low, which that's something I always kept tabs on, was I didn't want to run out of the products I was putting into my body because I was such a mess. But again, I just thank God for the patience of my wife and the patience of my counselor, and of course many others that were a big part and still are a big part of my journey. What are the 4 main things that you both talk about that's really important in recovery? It just came to mind, but counseling is one of them, and then spouse is another. Can you speak on that just briefly, the 4 main components that really help when a person's going through addiction?
Well, yeah. Kind of rebuilding, recovering, going through the whole process.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's some components that a lot of folks access, maybe 1 or 2.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, and what I've seen in working with people is that there's at least 4 major aspects to that I think if you get them all plugged in. So those 4, definitely working through any type of addiction. There's going to be specialized groups that speak to that. There's generalized and then specialized groups that speak to that. I think that's very important component to the whole. Much of the time, if at all, is that sufficient by itself. But you add that, I don't know that it would be true for 100% of the cases, but for many of them, the large majority, there are some, there's a past, right? Which a lot of goes back into our childhood, frankly, and dealing with those specifics requires some one-on-one, somebody that's got, is able to walk you through and pull some of that stuff out and help bring some healing on that level in that area. So having a counselor or somebody that's qualified in that whatever the particular area is also an asset. But that by itself is not entirely, there's more than that that's needed. I think everybody needs a church that they're plugged into, the body of Christ. There's a component there, and being accountable on that level to somebody in that setting is very important. I'd like to say that by itself also would be sufficient, but it's more than that. That's a very important component. And then the fourth area, and for me, I think it's the most critical or the most crucial out of the four, and that's because it can blow up a lot of the benefit and value that comes from the other three areas, and that's the home. Mm-hmm. I think it's very important. It's when like the family and the family unit, the husband and the wife, so the spouses. When one of those are going through a recovery journey, the other one is too. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times we say, well, it's the addict that's going through the recovery, and we don't spend a whole lot of time on the spouse, but the spouse is also going through recovery. Mm-hmm. A lot of spouses don't know that they're going through recovery, and so they don't address a lot of those things. But very important that both husband and wife recognize that they're on their own journey. And so the fourth component for me is that they are supporting each other. The husband supporting the wife, wife supporting in their respective journey, recovery journey, and then having accountability, which looks different in every one of those components, but all that. And of course, having the Lord being a part of the whole process is very important. So, I think those four. Can you recover without any one of them? Probably, maybe, but not. I don't think to the degree that you could when you have all four in place. So is that what you were looking for?
Absolutely, and I think of this chair that I'm sitting on now. It's got four legs, and that's why it's holding me up. But as you were talking, there was times you doubted and he was strong, or maybe he doubted and you were strong. And so in my journey, I definitely put time into all of those four: church attendance, counseling weekly. My spouse was supportive in doing her own counseling. The family, my kids were supportive. I know that's not always the case. What's that?
That's the God factor.
God, of course, yes, every single bit of the way. But
and you do groups too.
Groups, yes, thank you. Groups are huge, and we want to talk on that. I'll just jump in briefly. On one of the episodes, we have talked about the marriage intensive that my wife and I went to a few years ago. What year was that?
That was in 2019.
2019.
6 months into our adultery recovery journey.
And we did ask our counselor his opinion and told him we were entertaining
right here.
it.
He can tell us what he said about that.
So do you remember when we asked you about that and kind of the takeaway?
We had just started counseling with him. So I think we had started in December, January. We started meeting with you. And then we went to the intensive in February. So we hadn't been with you very long. Yeah.
I'd have to look at my notes to remember all that specifically, the timing. But I think there was something else that you guys did two before you did
Well,
that?
we did a weekend.
Well,
we did a marriage retreat.
We did a marriage. Yeah, and
was
that
not
was
helpful.
Yes, we did like one of the weekend to remembers in November, and that was disastrous.
We were not
Not
needing
that they weren't great
at the
but
time.
we
where
weren't.
you were at that time.
Yeah.
that
Where we
wasn't-
were at that
yeah.
time was not what we needed, because that was just more like marriage hell, like just generalized marriage work.
It's a
like,
great
go better
program
your
for
marriage.
maintenance. And,
But
yeah.
we were in adultery recovery,
Right.
and we needed specific. I'll never forget actually that weekend. You know, you're going and getting like communication help, be a better parent, be a better husband, be a better wife. Again, all great tools. But I'll never forget sitting in, I think it was a communication class, and they played a video before. And it was a video of like this husband that was basically being verbally abusive to his wife, just in her face, screaming, yelling. I had a panic attack I mean, a full-blown panic attack as they played that video, reliving the years with him. We just weren't ready for it.
Yeah.
It wasn't the right timing. It was so triggering for me. There was so many things said that weekend that was so triggering, because we were only 3 months.
Well, I think we were kind of hoping that was going to be kind of a marriage intensive, and then we didn't know about this until
we were naive.
Yeah.
We didn't know what we were doing. We just thought we want a better marriage. We're working on our marriage right now. This is great. Let's go.
And just to clarify, marriage retreats are incredible and very
Yes,
important.
but you have to be in
marriage
the right place for
intensives
them.
are very important. They're just drastically different.
Yes.
Yeah, so I knew that you had been there, and so we talked about that, and then you asked about the intensive, and I don't remember exactly everything that I said, but I think I was more for it than against, and so you went. I thought, it shouldn't hurt to be able to go to something like that, and let's talk about it when you get back. I think you were going to go anyway, regardless of what I said, which is great, fine.
I think we'd already
if
paid for
we
it.
were
you know,
de-
yeah,
we were
you were
desperate.
going.
Yeah, we'd already invested.
You were going to go anyway. But so you got done, you came back, and we talked about it, and there was so much positive, both of you. I remember Tom talking to me about, mentioning some of the things from his experience there, and then Lena also, and then together, and it seemed like it was a really, really positive experience, uncomfortable at times, but very positive. And I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think while you were there, the folks that were facilitating it said that the two of you would be doing that someday yourself.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking that same thing. I verbalized it. Don't remember exactly the words I used, but I said, you guys are going to do this someday. And I think it's then that you said, well, that's what they said.
Yeah.
I could see it. Hard for you to see it at that point, maybe, exactly how that would play out. But here we are.
And I just want to say thank you to the hosts of that marriage intensive. Hope you watch this. And when you did speak into our lives and say that we would be hosting these in the future, there was a moment where I thought, yeah, right. And there's a moment I thought, what if? And God continued to speak into our lives. And then Dr. Surstad confirmed it. And we're announcing that we are kicking off these marriage intensives. And so stay tuned. More information is coming. But this is a very awesome weekend that we walked away with hope. Not just hope for a marriage where we would coexist, because that's what I used to think, was if we stay together, it'll just be coexist, and maybe once the kids are out of the house, we'll then go our separate ways and find happiness elsewhere. I had all these different thoughts, and I remember going to that marriage intensive, sitting down in a room with 10 other couples. Nobody knew each other, and they all were there for adultery. And within a few minutes, we're announcing who we are, and right away my notebook says, Tom, basically you got to pick one or the other, and there's a paragraph for infidel, and there's one for betrayed spouse, and y'all know which one I was. And so I introduced myself and said, I'm Tom Lyman. I'm here for healing and hope because of the choices I made and what I did, and I'm the infidel. And it was just very hard to say that, But that's what happens in these rooms where we're not beating around the bush. We're not going to not call it like it is. We're going to get right into it. And by the end of those 2.5 days was a totally different man walking out of that building. And I did have hope that God was going to continue to do work in my life personally and in our marriage, and that just maybe we could have a great, incredible marriage. And I sit here today with my wife, and I say I wouldn't trade it for anything. Darling, staying together was the best choice. I'm so thankful. But there were people that spoke into my life whenever I didn't see the hope, and that's what we're continuing to do through this podcast and through everything that we do. But the marriage intensives provide that hope, that restoration is beautiful. What was your takeaway from the intensive?
Well, I'll just say that I wasn't surprised when they said we would do this one day, in the sense that, you know, and I've shared this before, but the night that you confessed everything on August 11th, 2018, our discovery.
A date that will never be
date
forgotten.
that will live on.
Amen.
But that night, and I've shared this, was the night that God also gave me a promise that he would take all that pain that I was feeling in that moment and use that to help others someday. So I always envisioned that, us together helping people. I didn't know what that was going to look like exactly in that moment. I just knew God was going to do something really big, because I was feeling a lot of pain in that moment. So if he was going to take all that pain and use it to help people like he said that he was going to do, then man, he was going to have something really big for us. So when they said that to us at that intensive 6 months later, that did not surprise me. Now, of course, the naive me thought, man, we'll be doing this in no time. You know, little did I know that we had years of relapses and more addiction and more recovery and a lot more work to do, because we tend to think that whatever God tells us and the promises he gives us, you know, they're going to come to pass right away. So our timing and his timing always look different, and what we think, you know, is just going to be this straight line and this neat and tidy little package is always like zigzags and swirls, and it's never what we think. So here we are in Dallas and not Seattle, and it's just been twists and turns and hiccups, you know, like Dr. Sirstad said, and it just hasn't looked the way we thought. And still in some ways doesn't look the way that we thought.
But in October,
but
2025 in Dallas.
2025, yes, October 9th through 11th, we will be hosting our first marriage intensive specific for adultery recovery. But it's not just going to be a first intensive. So let me specify. The intensive that we attended in 2019 that was so impactful, that we've referenced many times, that group had been doing those intensives for over 20 years. But that was one of the last ones that they hosted, because they retired after that. Well, we've been in touch with them since, and they have given us permission to use some of their same material and to continue some of the same work that they were doing. So we're going to be able to use a lot of what helped us and continue to use that to help others, combined with our own experience. And, you know, Dr. Sirstad, myself, you know, even Tom, we've also over the years have helped other couples through our counseling ministry, through other groups and such. We've helped couples recover from adultery and worked with couples through this process. So we're going to be compiling what we've used, our own stories of what we've been through, to help bring this intensive to Dallas and open it up to whoever wants to come and needs to find the same hope and healing that we have found. And we're very excited about this.
Very passionate about it.
This has been a burden and a passion for years for us. And then what we didn't realize when we brought this idea to Dr. Sirstad over 3 years ago is he said that this has been a burden of his for, I think you said, over 20 years. You have wanted to do something like this.
Yeah, a little over 20.
So this is
actually,
incredible.
Yeah. In fact, we had talked about doing one about 3 years ago, and we had it on the books. We had it scheduled, and it just didn't quite come to fruition. But as timing is everything, and God knows, and I think we're in a much stronger situation. I don't know if would have worked out good 3 years ago, but the desire was there and it never went away. And over the last 3 years, either it's been myself nudging the two of you, or one of you nudging the others of us. Between the three of us, I'm excited to be able to be a part of this, because I know that there are. I don't know the number, but I know that there's a lot of couples that just give up. And when adultery happens, and it's such a life altering experience, not really in a good way, you just don't know what's going to happen, not even tomorrow, but the rest of the day, and it's so overwhelming. And whether it's, I've talked to couples, and I've worked with couples in this arena for many years now, dealing with adultery, different levels, infidelity, and other types of addictions that affect the marriage. And I have found that it's mind shadow. He doesn't know what's going to happen. She doesn't know, and it could be her. There's sometimes it's her. She is the infidel. And a lot of times it's he that's the infidel, and a lot of even really, even as Christians, there's sometimes we position ourselves where there's no hope. We just don't know where to turn, and so I know that there's more and more resources, but specifically in the area of adultery recovery, I believe that even when there has been adultery happen in a couple, with a family, it doesn't have to be over. And I've watched this happen many times with many couples, where they're willing to put in the work, both of them, because there's work on both, with both of the individuals, the husband and the wife. There's work for both of them. When they're willing to do that, when they're willing to put in the time, I have seen over and over and over where their relationship with each other is stronger than it ever was before. And that's weird to say. Yeah. That doesn't sound like that would be the case, but there's things that we bring into our marriage. There's things from our past that sometimes we're not aware of, that affect our behavior, affect our decisions, affect our thoughts. And so that initial relationship, the husband and wife relationship, although it starts off great and we may feel like it's great and wonderful at the time, when healing comes, not only to the marriage, but to the individuals in the marriage and things that preceded the marriage, when they're allowed to heal, they're addressed, they're brought to the surface, and healing hurts. And I know all that. The process is not easy. It's full of agony, and just watching and being a participant from where I sit there many times inside. I'm grieving, I'm crying inside, sometimes on the outside too, with folks. But I've watched it systematic, and I've seen this where their relationship is ultimately better. The intimacy, I'm not talking just about the sexual or only about the sexual part of a marriage, but the intimacy of that couple supersedes whatever was there before. The affection, the glue that ties them together, the levels that they're connected wasn't there before. And so as bad, as much as I wish in many ways that adultery didn't happen, when it does, and it doesn't have to happen. Let me say it doesn't have to happen to get to that stage. Right. Okay, let me stipulate that. that thought just went through my mind of what could happen as a result of that statement. So let me stipulate: you don't have to go that direction. You can, but a lot of times that's a major wake-up call.
Right.
And if the couple is gonna, if they want to stick it out, and I honor not just the betrayed spouse, but it takes a lot, which I do respect them tremendously. But it also takes a lot of courage for, as has been called, the infidel, to stand there and own that, and take responsibility for that. And it's a part of the past that comes up. We're telling the story, here, and I have a lot of admiration for the two of you. And what the telling your story over and over and over, and here Tom is, and he's got that word that's been associated to him, and he's just telling the story. That takes a lot of courage.
Yes, it does.
On a continual basis, and I wish it hadn't happened.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've seen as a result, so from there to now, and I'm sure you're continuing to grow. And I'll tell you another layer of relationship that is impacted. It's not only the husband and wife or the spousal relationship that gets much stronger or can get much stronger after the fact, going through all the work, but I have seen the relationship between people who have gone through that and God, their relationship with God, take on a whole nother level and become much deeper and much stronger than was ever there before. Mm-hmm. And I think that their relationship with their children and with others. So I don't know we're at the part yet, but I'll intrude here that that if you've experienced that, if you've experienced adultery in your marriage and you're still together, I know that there's some that I've talked to that haven't addressed it, like 5 years later, 10 years, 20 years later, they haven't addressed it. So this intensive that we're talking about, it's not just not only for people that have experienced it on a fresh basis, like last month or last quarter or last year, but if that's never been addressed, that's like an elephant in the room, in the bedroom, and in every room really in the house, and a part of life that you can still find healing from that. And we definitely want you to be a part of this as well. So yeah, I know that there's a lot of grief in the process. There's a lot of tears in the process. But if I can just infuse hope here, if you're willing to pursue that and go through that and allow the Lord to give you some guidance and some people, trusted people in your life to give you some guidance through it, it can be so much greater on the other side that you just. I don't know if you can believe me or not in that, but I hope there's enough belief there that at least you'll try it and try to prove me wrong.
What would you say to, because we both work in the counseling ministry and we've heard a lot of stories. What would you say to a couple who has experienced adultery in their marriage 10, 15, 20 years ago? And the advice they were given at the time was just forgive each other and never talk about it again. Mm-hmm. So that's what they attempted to do. They never really sought any sort of counseling or recovery process from, the adultery. And years later, they think that it's all in the past, so it hasn't really affected them, but their marriage is having issues, and maybe they don't realize it's because they never really dealt with the adultery back, and again, it could be 15, 20 years ago. But what would you say to that couple? Do they need something like this that we're offering? Would they benefit from an intensive like this?
So,
or should they just leave the past in the past? Because I know a lot of people have that mentality. Why bring it up? It happened so long ago.
well, if the wound is still there, it needs to be addressed. And however long it's been, and I know that it's not exciting for at least one, if it's the betrayed spouse that hasn't been able to move on. A lot of times the one that committed the adultery or was unfaithful to the spouse, they've processed a lot, and they're hoping that it can be moved on. A lot of times they lose patience with their spouse that's trying to recover, and they just want them to move on, and it can be very frustrating on both sides. So my short answer is yes, but forgiveness is an interesting process, and it's not a one-time thing. It's not just repeating some words. There's some action that's involved in that. And that wound, we really don't know ourselves. So we don't know ourselves like God knows us. But when one wound comes into our life, it can be a massive wound. It's not just that one wound that we're dealing with many times. It's a compilation of many wounds that have not been addressed. And so that one wound takes a beating, so to speak. We focus on the one wound, but that is accentuated by many others, many times, that have not been addressed. It's just that's the one that gets the attention. So I think that there's a place for that couple in these intensives as well. The wound can be healed. 20 years later, the wound can be healed. It just needs to be allowed to. And frankly, we have a problem sometimes, or a challenge sometimes, with letting healing take place. And God's a healer. I believe I've seen that. I've experienced that myself on multiple occasions. I know that God heals physically. He heals emotionally and mentally and socially, spiritually. He's a healer. But a lot of times, and we're not always aware of this, but a lot of times we get in the way of that healing. And if we don't let him, he's not going to barge in and make us be healed. Mm-hmm. And so there's a process. And so I'm thankful for, people like you folks and others, and there's many more and more that are moving in this direction to help people find that place of healing. And it's part of the body, and there's definitely a place for that in the ongoing need. So
yeah. I'll never forget the intensive we went to. There was a couple there, probably in their 70s, that as we went around the room and shared our stories, their adultery had happened 35 years prior to that intensive, and they were there because they still had not processed and healed from that 35 years, and it hadn't happened since, but it had happened 35 years ago. And I remember looking at Tom and just telling him, that's why we're here. Like, I refuse to be that couple 35 years from now that we still haven't healed from this. And I don't understand why people would want to live with that and not, and I understand that it's a lot of work because we've done that work and it's not fun and it's not easy, but the rewards of what's on the other side when you are willing to put that work in are so worth it. If you'll go through that process, what's waiting for you on the other side of, like he said, a marriage that can be stronger than what it was before, is so worth it.
Well, I think what holds people back is the fear of what other people are going to think. So, I don't walk through life now saying, hi, I'm Tom, I'm an infidel, or hi, I'm Tom, I'm an addict. I do say that I'm Tom, I'm recovered from addiction. I'm recovered from being an infidel because of God. And every day I have a choice. And so bringing it to the surface, there's lots of sayings that go through my mind from all the recovery circles I sit in. One is you're only as sick as your secrets, which ties in with the Bible that says confess your faults, to yourself, to God, and to someone you trust. And so bringing and shining the light on these topics, it's embarrassing. There is a lot of shame attached. But as God continues to change your perspective and have a paradigm shift and say, hold on, what if the actual most embarrassing thing I ever did is actually the thing I'm supposed to talk about the most. And then you write a book, and then you start a podcast, and you join us in these marriage intensives, and you provide hope for other people. You're ahead of the enemy that tries to whisper in your ear saying, I remember what you did. You're already going, yeah, me too, and I just told 10 people. So it gives a boldness and a confidence to say, you know what, I'm not actively today an infidel. Years ago, yeah, that was the case, but God. And pointing people to God is the purpose of why we're here, what we're supposed to be doing. And what I've found in the last 3.5, 4 years I've been sharing more openly is that's what people want to see is, can God, we can hear God's awesome all day long, but can God heal my marriage? Can God deliver me of this addiction? You know, another story that comes to mind in that room, there was a couple that actually, from what they shared, they had not had physical adultery, but it was just one more text message away. And I sat there and listened to their story and thought, wow, that's awesome. They got in this room. He had been into pornography, of course, which is 99% of the time with anybody that's got into adultery, there is pornography as well. But he had got into that, and then some sexting and talking to another female, and talks about meeting up. And I think they had just about met up once or twice, and then the phone was discovered, and however it came out. But they sat there still broken like I was, broken like my wife was. They were going through the same sort of emotions and feelings and no hope, and yet it wasn't a full-blown physical affair. But I thank God for these type of marriage intensives, and so excited to bring it here to Dallas. It is the thing that God gave me the first hope. I think of it like this: an emergency room. If right now I had a major situation physically, you all would take me to the ER, right? Mm-hmm. I wouldn't stay there probably for the next year or 2 or 3, but there would be a plan of healing. There would be a doctor visit after that. There'd be a follow-up visit, and then eventually there'd be physical therapy visits that I would have to choose to go to. Y'all been to physical therapy? Sometimes it's like, what am I doing here? But if you trust the process, and you go from the ER to the doctor to the physical therapy, and then the maintenance program, the exercise, don't ever give up, it can then take you to a point where you're turning around and sharing that process with somebody else. And that's where the victory comes in. You know, the Bible talks about this. How do we overcome? By the blood of the Lamb, the word of our testimony, and they love not their life unto the death. This life is short, and we're here to take all this pain, use it for a purpose. And as my wife and I and Dr. Surstad host these marriage intensives, I believe there will be thousands, if not millions, of people impacted, yes. But even if it's for one marriage like ours, we're going to do it, and it's worth it. So no matter what you're going through, look into what's going to be offered here in October in Dallas, and I encourage you, step out in faith. Life is too short to care what other people think about what happened. They've got their own stuff going on. So if you're in a spot where that shame and that embarrassment's trying to hold you back, the biggest thing is step out and ask for help. And that's what we did. And that's why we sit here. Our kids are in the other room, and they know our story. And there's a boldness that came through counseling, through the marriage intensive, through Yes Church, and through a lot of reading. But putting in the work turns all of that pain into a purpose. I just thank God for people coming into our lives at the right time when I never thought this was possible. I mean, even some days I wake up and I'm like, wow, look what the Lord has done. As far as our marriage being better, I would agree with that. I think it is better now than even when we first met. And I wrote down here that our marriage can only be as strong as our honesty is. And although I remember telling you when we were dating everything about me, there was still some things I kept as far as my pornography addiction that I didn't share with you all the way. And so we even started our marriage with I had dishonesty. So if you want your marriage to be completely strong and healed, it's going to be in relation to your level of honesty. Your honesty's here, your marriage is going to be here. Your honesty's here, it's going to be here. But that is the most important thing in a marriage is honesty and trust. I've got a question here. I know we've got a few more minutes or so, but Dr. Surstad, you have walked with us for many, many years through all of this. And so I'm going to ask you the question, what brings you the most joy when you look at what God has done in our marriage and the work that we're doing?
Well, I think you just said it. It's just being able, I think for anybody that puts any part of them into the lives of somebody else, to see them take that and not just implement it themselves, but then to begin to help others. You're multiplying the time that has been spent and invested, and it is an investment.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of mental energy. Just a lot. It is an investment, but to be able to see, okay, that they didn't just take this, but now they're impacting other lives with it, and dare I say, in a more, I don't know about more qualified, but in a words escaping me right now, but in an impactful way that looks different than me. Mm-hmm. You know, so they're going to be able to impact other people. So when we take things, it doesn't all have to look like I'm my own person, and the two of you have evolved, and you've been able, you're it's just, you're doing a great work, but you're not trying to emulate anybody else. God is taking you and creating a package with not just one or both other. You both have individual talents and capabilities, but together, and that is the most exciting thing for me. Mm-hmm. When I look as what God is doing with you together. Because, as I said, both of you have capabilities, and you're using them individually, but together it's like you're a powerhouse. Mm-hmm. So I think it's cool. I
think it's special to sit here in the room with almost two doctors. My wife here is very close to getting that label. So Dr. Lana here, soon to be, and Dr. Surstad, and we are very different, and our temperaments are a big part of that. And so to the audience, if you've never heard of temperament or done any research, both of these doctors here are professionals in explaining creation theory and temperament, which is huge. If you want to touch briefly on that, Lana?
I'll let Dr. Surstad do that. He's much better.
Give us a couple minutes of what is temperament?
Therapy.
Well, we're both Lana and myself have been involved in temperament therapy, and that's one of the things where we started. We had some conversation before that, but when we got serious about working together, that's one of the things that surfaced was temperament.
And it was a really big part of our recovery journey was understanding the temperament.
Yeah, and it's simply who God created you to be, and there's a difference in the understanding that we access. There's a difference between temperament, which is who God created you to be, and personality, which is who we create us to be, and which happens. We all of us can implement personality, and many times multiple personalities, sometimes on a daily basis, which for me simply means that we learn to act one way with one group and another way with another. But to understand who God created me to be in the beginning, even before breath on our own, sometime before birth, that God implanted all these traits within me. And then life, we're born, and our environment impacts us, and there's some learned behavior and personality, and the farther away that we get, our personality gets from who God created us to be, there's a lot of there's excess stress and anxiety and conflict, and so the temperament theory of temperament just brings us to a place of understanding, which is huge. Being able to understand ourselves, our spouses, our family, and that allows us to be more in line with who God created us to be. And there's more peace, more understanding, more patience, many times, and so I think it's the basis of what I do, regardless of what, working with clients, regardless of the presenting problem or concern. That's where we start.
How does it help couples?
So working with couples, it's great that the husband is able to understand things about himself, and the wife is able to understand things about herself. And I've had a lot of couples say, "Yeah, I know that," but usually there's things they don't know why.
Yeah.
They don't know why, and so being able to bring clarity individually is great. But then all of a sudden, a lot of times when I'm working with couples at that initial stage, I see, and I'm talking about the traits of one spouse. I see the other spouse grinning and going like this, and then the roles are reversed. And it's just, so they identify with that. But being able to, for the spouses to be able to understand each other. And when they get serious about it, being more patient, extending more grace towards each other, and knowing that it's not just a fabrication that people have come up with. This is really how God created them to be. And all of us have strengths and all of us have weaknesses. And so allowing God to, focusing on those strengths, allowing God to implement them even to greater fashion, but then also being aware of our needs is very important, and letting God, positioning ourselves so that those needs can be met in a Christ-like manner. God, but it's just a very, we need a whole show on that.
I
just
was
specifically
thinking that we will do an entire show just on temperament.
Well, what about the intensives? Are we gonna introduce any temperament related things into our marriage intensive? Should couples that are watching be able to anticipate some of that? I mean, because like I said, I feel like on the recovery journey side, me understanding Tom's temperament, there were things that I used to be so frustrated about with Tom that once I understood his temperament, I started realizing, oh wait, this is how God made him. I can't get mad at him anymore for this. Isn't just him being, trying to frustrate me, that God actually made him this way. And, but then there were also things that he had to realize that, okay, I can't use my temperament as an excuse. I have to work on these things, or we have to learn to work together within our temperaments.
Well, the area of affection, we'll just touch on that briefly. I'm a very huggy, kissy, like haven't seen her in an hour, and I, just
a minute.
Once again, I'm like, hey, and that's just who I am. Very hands-on, golden retriever, Tom, whatever you want to call me. But in our affection area, I remember so many times coming home from work or long day and thinking that I'm going to walk in and you're just like, oh my goodness, you're home. And just, you'd be like me, right? And a lot of times you'd be like, welcome home, and dinner will be in an hour. And I'm like, I just got let down because I thought that was a representation of, well, she's not attracted to me or she doesn't love me as much. And I think it's pretty clear how much she loves me. She's still married to me. So that shouldn't be a question, right, Tom? But through all of those years, prior to not understanding temperaments, I used to get very frustrated with you, right, because I took offense to that. And so my needs were going unmet, and therefore I sought unhealthy ways to meet those needs, and I went into all those things that I have shared so openly instead of going to God and to my Bible and to quiet time and to journaling and the tools that I use now. But temperaments really opened my understanding to who I am, but as important or more is who she is. And then also now we've done the tests with our kids, and it's just amazing, the whole phlegmatic, melancholy, choleric, and I'm learning and going to catch up with you soon on understanding it even better. But it's very important. It helps with marriages, it helps with career placement, but I definitely would say temperament is going to be talked about at the intensive, yes, but then offered as a deeper dive.
Yeah, that was my question.
Yeah.
So will it be a
package,
tool that will
yeah,
be available to the couples attending the intensives to help them on their journey?
So I don't want anybody to, or from my perspective anyway, I don't want anybody to think that these intensives that are dealing specifically with adultery in the marriage, that it is like it's going to answer everything, that when you leave, everything's going to be dealt with and taken care of. I
Just
don't
3
want,
days, everything's going to be
No,
perfect.
no.
Yeah, that's not going to
No.
be the case. There is going to be some work after.
lot of
There
work.
is more after that. It is a process with that will help tremendously, but it's not everything in and of itself right there.
I think the goal of people coming in for that weekend is that you can leave and realize that there's hope for our marriage. Like this.
Well,
This isn't the end.
your
The
arm
adultery
that was
doesn't have
broken
to
is
destroy
now
us.
at least put in a cast.
Yeah,
it's the ER.
it sets you up with tools to get you going on your journey.
And we're not going to leave the couples hanging.
Right, they'll
When
be-
they leave, we're going to maintain contact.
There's the
and-
doctor visits, there's the
Yes.
maintenance,
Yeah.
the physical therapy,
Yeah.
and that's all done through, of course, counseling.
There'll be groups and stuff to keep in
Group sessions,
contact
yeah.
to help you continue that journey after.
Our
as well.
goal in this too is, of course, to provide everything, all the tools you need for the hope and healing, but to see how many couples, when God leads them, can continue to be a part of this. We look at this like a large movement across the country, and we will be looking for others to be a part of it, to be there and host
When the time's
events
right,
with us
yes.
whenever God opens those doors. But that's where a lot of the healing comes, is turning around and helping others.
Yep.
So I know we're winding down on time, and we pray that this has been extremely helpful and clear. If you have any questions, just reach out to us. Again, this is all about using real talk about real life and getting things out of the dark and into the light so they can be healed, and just want to speak hope into your lives. As we close out here, any other thoughts or comments?
Oh, I think we've had some pretty powerful discussion today.
Yep. Been fun.
All right.
Joyful even.
Very joyful, yes. And joy is not
I hope
something...
y'all enjoy my jacket.
Love the
Yeah.
jacket.
Your jacket
Yeah.
is very joyful.
Yeah, they don't wear it every day, but just for you folks.
I'm so thankful because every time somebody's life is changed, it impacts so many others. And so be bold and reach out, get out of denial, ask for help. The best things in my life have been when I've asked for help. So so
I think the
grateful.
best thing is when you start actually listening to the help being offered.
This is true. This is true. So as we close out here, I just want to say, wow, what a powerful conversation. Dr. Surstad, thank you for never giving up on us and for continuing to show up for couples who are ready to do the hard work. If you're listening and this episode hit something deep in you, don't sit on it. Take the step, get honest, find someone you can't lie to, and commit to the process. For more information on the marriage intensives, see the link below. This is the Joy Hour Show.